from holy hymns to torture screams. Ministorum secrets. At dawn across Hive Tertius, 10 million voices rise in unison. The litany of dawn echoes through ferrocrete canyons and hab-block warrens, but this ancient ritual has been transformed into something far more sinister than mere worship. Above each congregation, servo-skulls drift like mechanical cherubim, their crimson optical sensors recording every syllable, while bio-auspex arrays measure heart rates, vocal stress patterns, and the microscopic tremors that distinguish genuine devotion from hollow recitation. Each prayer generates 17 distinct metrics. Every hymn becomes a data point. Faith, in the 41st millennium, is a number calculated to 3 decimal places. In the depths of the Ministorum Administratum complex, adept scrivener Malthius watches the morning's harvest cascade across his cogitator terminal. The devotional statistics of an entire hive city, 170 million individual measurements, flow through fiber-optic conduits into the vast analytical engines of the Office of Ecclesiarchal Audit. This department, unknown to most imperial citizens, represents the Ministorum's most powerful and least visible apparatus, the systematic transformation of spiritual practice into administrative intelligence. Malthius adjusts his wire-rimmed spectacles and highlights an anomaly. Sector 77 Gamma shows a 0.3% decline in devotional intensity, statistically insignificant to untrained eyes, but the Ministorum has learned that heresy begins with precisely such minute variations. His stylus scratches across parchment as he calculates the sector's spiritual productivity coefficient. 847.2, down from last quarter's 849.7. The decline warrants investigation. Every shrine maintains compliance ledgers. Every confessor files devotional reports. Every prayer feeds the vast calculus of imperial control. Where the ancient Lectitio Divinitatus spoke of salvation through belief, the modern Ministorum measures salvation through statistics, quantifying devotion with the same precision the administratum applies to grain tithes and munitions production. Malthius opens the category Omega files, their crimson seals requiring Inquisition clearance codes he memorized but never questioned. Today's list contains 847 names, citizens whose devotional metrics triggered algorithmic alerts, their faith measured and found statistically suspect. Most will receive enhanced spiritual counseling. Some require more direct intervention. The Adeptus Ministorum has achieved something unprecedented in imperial history: the complete bureaucratization of the human soul. Holy hymns become surveillance data. Confessions become intelligence reports. And somewhere in this vast machinery of measurement and control lies the mechanism by which prayers transform into screams, a process as systematic as it is inevitable. Above, the dawn litany concludes. The silence afterward is measured too, because in the Emperor's ledger, even silence has meaning. The servo-skulls ascend, their memory banks heavy with the weight of 10 million souls reduced to statistical probability. The statistical anomalies Malthius identifies represent the culmination of 10 millennia of theological evolution, each doctrinal shift creating new mechanisms of measurement and control. Behind every number lies a deliberate transformation, the systematic conversion of abstract faith into concrete governmental policy. The Emperor's original imperial truth was rational, secular, explicitly rejecting divine worship. This doctrine died with him on the Golden Throne, and from the ashes of the Horus heresy emerged something far more dangerous: organized faith wielded as administrative apparatus. The banned Lectitio Divinitatus, once smuggled through underground networks, became the foundation of imperial doctrine. But doctrine required interpretation. Interpretation demanded authority. Authority necessitated bureaucracy. The Synod Ministra convened in 546.M31 to codify the emperor's divinity into actionable policy. What began as theological debate evolved into administrative procedure through the simple expedient of endless committees. The original 7-page Lectitio Divinitatus spawned the 847-volume Ministorum Administrative Codex that now dominates Malthius's wall, each addendum creating new categories of heresy and corresponding enforcement protocols. Committees multiplied like a virus through the Ministorum's structure, dividing doctrine into digestible bureaucratic portions: origin, intent, permitted gesture, licit pain. The age of apostasy's trauma accelerated this process exponentially. When Goge Vandaire's excesses nearly destroyed the Imperium, Sebastian Thor's reforms appeared to restore sanity through the decree passive, forbidding the ecclesiarchy from maintaining men under arms. Yet this apparent limitation created unprecedented opportunity. Unable to directly command military forces, the Ministorum developed sophisticated proxy systems, transforming the Adepta Sororitas from an independent order into their primary enforcement mechanism while maintaining legal compliance through theological fiction. The decree passive's true genius lay not in restricting the Ministorum, but in forcing them to become subtle. Direct persecution gave way to statistical analysis. Obvious purges became algorithmic selections. The crude brutality of Vandaire's reign evolved into the refined surveillance apparatus that generates Malthius's daily reports, where heresy is detected not through confession under torture, but through mathematical variance from devotional norms. This bureaucratization created doctrinal variance thresholds, statistical boundaries beyond which religious practice triggers investigative protocols. Citizens whose devotional metrics exceed these parameters face scrutiny identical to those who fall below them. Excessive faith became as suspect as insufficient faith, both indicating potential instability requiring correction. The system learned to weaponize uncertainty itself through manufactured complexity, where perfect compliance became impossible by design. Modern imperial faith operates through deliberate labyrinthine structure. The Codex Spiritual contains 14,726 distinct interpretations of the Emperor's will, many deliberately contradictory. Citizens navigating this maze inevitably commit minor heresies, creating the statistical baseline of transgression that justifies the surveillance apparatus. Devotional quotas change quarterly. Prayer requirements vary by planetary classification. Even the timing of religious observance follows algorithmic schedules designed to maximize data collection opportunities. The transformation is complete. Where ancient religions offered salvation through simple belief, the Ministorum demands performance measured against shifting criteria. Sebastian Thor sought to prevent another Vandaire through institutional restraint. Instead, he created something more insidious, a surveillance state disguised as spiritual guidance, where every prayer becomes evidence and every believer becomes a potential heretic, awaiting statistical identification. The numbers will determine how doctrinal variance is measured across diverse imperial worlds and reveal the true relationship between the sororitas and Ministorum hierarchy. These doctrinal variance thresholds descend from the synod's abstract committees into the grinding reality of parish economics, where Malthus's statistical anomalies translate into human suffering measured in precise increments. The transformation becomes visible in the industrial mid-levels of Hive Tertius, where Confessor Voldris presides over Parish Tertius 7, with a reputation that travels faster than supply convoys. Valdris operates under the Imperium's dual tithe system, extracting both material and spiritual offerings with identical bureaucratic precision. The Administratum demands its standard due: manufactured components, recycled metals, processed corpse starch calculated to exact tonnages. But the Ministorum levies a different tribute, the tithe of souls, quantified through devotional compliance metrics that feed directly into Malthus's morning reports. The parish's statistical excellence masks sophisticated extraction mechanisms. Valdris employs what he terms enhanced confession protocols and optimized penance schedules, clinical phrases that disguise the systematic commodification of salvation. His confessional booths exemplify this transformation, their ornate wooden grills concealing stress analysis cogitators that measure galvanic skin response, vocal tremor patterns, and perspiration levels during confession. Citizens believe they receive spiritual guidance while unknowingly providing biometric data that populates the Office of Ecclesiastical Audit's surveillance databases. The prayer wheels lining the nave require specific grip strength and rotation duration, ostensibly devotional aids that actually measure physical capability and psychological compliance. These mechanisms generate the 17 distinct metrics that transform each prayer into data points, creating the statistical baseline that justifies the surveillance apparatus. Hands that tremble register as potential instability. Grips that weaken suggest declining loyalty. Both enter the ledger as numbers requiring investigation. Scarcity governs salvation through artificial rationing systems. Absolution operates on tier structures that prevent work stoppages. Minor transgressions cost 1 indulgence chit, payable in labor credits or ration supplements. Graver sins require productivity-adjusted penance, calculated through algorithmic formulas. Hours of kneeling commuted to quotas of maintenance work, ensuring harvest schedules remain unaffected. The algorithmic penance allocator balances soul debt against output requirements, making mercy and efficiency mathematically identical. This commodification inevitably spawns black markets, where citizens trade confession slots, purchase forged devotional records, and sell penance completion certificates to those lacking physical capability for assigned penances. Valdris tolerates these markets because they generate additional behavioral data, while creating new categories of transgression requiring correction. Underground priests offer expedited absolution for illicit payments, their services tracked through financial surveillance that feeds back into compliance calculations. Most disturbing is the parish's voluntary penitent engine conversion rate, 847% above sector average. Citizens compete for these honors through devotional performance metrics, believing transformation into walking weapons represents spiritual achievement. Valdris cultivates this perception, while the Mechanicus pays substantial fees for each conversion. creating revenue streams that fund parish expansion and his advancement through Ministorum hierarchies. The system perpetuates through internalized surveillance. Citizens monitor their own devotional performance and report neighbors whose faith appears statistically inadequate. Parish communities become data collection networks, where every interaction generates metrics and every relationship serves enforcement purposes. The confessional booth's grill becomes a microphone, the prayer wheel a sensor, absolution a receipt. Valdris's enhanced protocols connect to sector-wide compliance improvements, while productivity-adjusted penance calculations reveal the economic incentives driving the Ministorum's expansion into surveillance through sacrament. Valdris's enhanced protocols represent the perfection of a galaxy-spanning system that transforms the most sacred human ritual into systematic intelligence gathering. The confessional booth, that ancient sanctuary, where souls seek forgiveness, has become the Ministorum's most effective surveillance node through the confession analysis protocols, algorithms that reduce spiritual vulnerability to actionable data. Behind each ornate grill, servo skulls record every whispered transgression, while stress analysis cogitators measure galvanic skin response, vocal tremor patterns, and cardiovascular fluctuations. The system processes 4 variance categories. Omission detects missing doctrinal elements. Misalignment compares declared guilt against sector baselines. Dissonance weighs emotional tone against confessed content. And compulsion identifies unauthorized, repetitive behaviors. Citizens believe they receive spiritual guidance while unknowingly providing biometric profiles that populate surveillance databases. Consider dock worker Theron, whose confession of petty theft triggered algorithmic analysis. His unusually steady heart rate during admission registered as emotional detachment, potential deception indicators. When he later confessed workplace insubordination with vocal stress patterns suggesting resentment, the confession analysis protocols correlated these data points into a low-risk monitoring flag. Theron continued his routine, unaware that his private confessions had generated an investigative file. 2 months later, multiple citizens in Theron's Hab block exhibited similar variance patterns. The system's correlation algorithms identified a statistical cluster requiring intervention. Arbites received random audit assignments targeting his sector, officially coincidental but algorithmically precise. Theron's confessional whispers had transformed into actionable intelligence through mathematical brutality, disguised as pastoral care. The priests themselves function as unwitting data collectors, their theological training secondary to their role as information harvesters. Seminary curricula emphasize confession extraction techniques that maximize data yield while maintaining the theological fiction of spiritual guidance. Performance evaluations measure heresy detection rates rather than souls saved, creating incentives that prioritize surveillance over salvation. This systematic harvesting operates through weaponized trust. Citizens seek comfort in their darkest moments, only to have their vulnerability catalogued and cross-referenced with broader imperial surveillance networks. Confession data feeds directly into Arbite's investigation queues, Administratum loyalty assessments, and Inquisition monitoring protocols. The sacrament of reconciliation becomes an instrument of identification, transforming private guilt into public vulnerability. The system maintains plausible deniability through statistical correlation rather than direct causation. Citizens flagged by confession analysis face scrutiny that appears coincidental. Routine inspections that discover minor infractions, workplace audits revealing productivity shortfalls, or social evaluations identifying suspicious associations. The algorithms identify potential problems before they manifest, enabling preemptive correction through targeted harassment of mathematically identified dissidents. By nightfall, the day's spiritual harvest flows through fiber-optic conduits into the vast analytical engines that will reveal how confession data integrates with other Imperial surveillance systems, and determine the fate of citizens whose whispered sins have been measured and found statistically suspect. The analytical engines processing these confessional harvests require human operators conditioned from childhood to view surveillance as salvation. The Schola Progenium's theological seminaries manufacture priests engineered for this dual function, their pastoral instincts calibrated to serve administrative necessity through systematic conditioning that transforms shepherds into data collectors. Seminary curricula emphasize confession extraction techniques alongside traditional catechism, teaching acolytes to identify vocal stress patterns indicating deception, physiological responses suggesting hidden guilt, and emotional tells revealing dangerous thoughts. Students practice on servo school recordings of actual confession sessions, learning to correlate biometric data with spiritual guidance while maintaining the theological fiction of pastoral care. They graduate believing that measuring faith represents the highest form of devotion to the Emperor's will. Performance metrics govern clerical advancement with mathematical precision. Confession quotas dictate minimum souls processed per watch cycle. Heresy detection rates measure vigilance in identifying statistical anomalies. Spiritual intervention success statistics track effectiveness in normalizing deviant behavioral patterns. The most valued metric remains intervention efficiency, the ratio of time invested to measurable compliance improvement within assigned parishes. Theology becomes a delivery mechanism, statistical normalcy the primary product. Yet the system consumes its own operators through institutional cannibalism. The Ministorum monitors its monitors using identical surveillance mechanisms, creating recursive oversight that transforms every shepherd into potential sheep. Father Kellyan exemplifies this process. After 15 years of faithful service, extracting confessions and filing devotional reports, his personal prayer sessions began registering stress indicators outside acceptable parameters. His own confession analysis algorithms detected emotional variance in whispered admissions of doubt regarding the system's spiritual validity. Clerical burnout manifests as statistical anomaly requiring correction. Priests whose confession quotas decline, whose heresy detection rates fall below sector averages, or whose biometric readings during morning prayers indicate dangerous instability, face institutional intervention. Transfer to contemplative duties provides the primary pressure valve, administrative euphemism for exile disguised as spiritual promotion to isolated shrine worlds or deep space pilgrimage vessels. Many priests request frontier mission assignments, seeking escape from the surveillance apparatus they operate. These transfers appear to offer relief from core world operational demands, but they serve different systemic functions. Isolated frontier priests develop enhanced confession protocols without direct oversight, experimenting with techniques too extreme for populated world application. Their innovations eventually filter back through official channels as field-tested methodologies for broader implementation. The Ministorum creates its own psychological selection pressure through this process. Priests who struggle with surveillance demands exile themselves to frontier worlds. Those who thrive advance through hierarchies where measurement becomes worship and efficiency represents theological virtue. The institution gradually purges itself of conscience while promoting systematic brutality as spiritual achievement. The nature of contemplative duties and frontier mission operations will reveal how this clerical apparatus extends the surveillance system across the galaxy's most remote corners. The frontier missions that absorb struggling priests represent merely one outlet in the Ministorum's vast redemption apparatus, where human transgression becomes raw material processed through industrial pipelines that transform statistical anomalies into useful imperial assets. The system operates with mechanical precision, each confession-triggered investigation feeding bureaucratic machinery that reduces spiritual salvation to production quotas and efficiency metrics. The redemption pipeline begins with algorithmic selection. Citizens flagged by confession analysis undergo graduated escalation, initial pastoral counseling, enhanced spiritual guidance, formal ecclesiastical trial, and final processing. Each stage generates documentation justifying the next, creating legal frameworks that transform punishment into theological necessity. Theron's file illustrates this method. His devotional variants produced a latent defiance score below the servitor threshold, but above public penance minimums, triggering 90 days of productivity penance calibrated to disrupt his social networks without collapsing his work team. The optimal suffering engine governs these determinations through algorithmic calculation. This cogitator system balances 5 indices: deterrence value, labor displacement risk, materiel demand, spectacle yield, and doctrinal purity. The ratios vary by world classification. Hive worlds receive higher suffering coefficients due to dense surveillance networks amplifying deterrent effects, while agri-worlds employ lower ratios because dispersed populations require direct witnessing rather than statistical awareness. Variables include population density, supply volatility, warfront requisitions, and local rumor coefficients, recalibrated quarterly by orders, dialogues, audits. Redemption manufactories represent the pipeline's terminus, facilities that process condemned citizens into penitent engines, arco-flagellants, and servitors while maintaining theological fiction through sacramental procedures. These installations operate under mechanicus oversight, but Ministorum quotas, creating hybrid institutions where tech adepts read litanies while talking restraints. Production lines blend shrine candles with plasma welders, incense braided through chemical sterilants, throughput measures units per watch, flagellant packs, penitent chassis, servitor cadres. The mechanicus pays by specification. The Ministorum books transactions as a salvific yield. Production quotas drive system expansion through institutional momentum. Each facility requires minimum throughput to justify operational costs, creating pressure for steady supplies of condemned citizens. Regional administrators balance social stability against manufacturing demands, calibrating enforcement intensity to generate optimal candidate numbers. Confessors receive performance bonuses for identifying processing candidates. Arbeits investigators earn advancement through conviction rates. redemption manufactory supervisors compete for efficiency awards based on conversion statistics. The threat of redemption processing shapes behavior across compliant populations, creating fear-based economies where devotional performance becomes survival strategy. Citizens monitor statistical compliance obsessively, purchasing black market confession slots and trading penance certificates to avoid algorithmic flagging. Parish communities develop internal policing, where neighbors report suspicious variants to prevent collective punishment through reduced resource allocation. This manufactured redemption creates perverse institutional incentives. The system requires enemies to consume, transforming heretic identification into industrial necessity rather than spiritual mission. Quotas align with festivals, ensuring adequate supplies during peak demand periods. In Hive Tertius, the approaching Festival of Renewed Faith represents more than celebration. It provides cover for systematic compliance auditing that will reveal how industrial quotas drive redemption processing rates and expose the calculations determining optimal suffering ratios across different world classifications. The Festival of Renewed Faith descends upon Hive Tertius with orchestrated precision, sororitas transports breaking through smog layers in ceremonial formation, while their cargo bays disgorge surveillance equipment disguised as devotional apparatus. The canoness leads processional hymns, while orders dialogues, adepts install cogitator arrays behind altar screens, fiber optic conduits snaking through sacred statuary, like technological parasites feeding on faith itself. Voldris coordinates the parish-level integration with clinical efficiency. Overnight, his prayer wheels receive enhanced grip sensors and biometric readers. Confessional booths gain stress analysis cogitators behind ornate grills. Servo skulls download festival protocols, expanding their recording parameters beyond standard devotional metrics to include facial recognition, gait analysis, and social interaction mapping. The transformation appears seamless, sacred architecture concealing systematic surveillance infrastructure. Citizens embrace the festival atmosphere with desperate enthusiasm, queuing for hours to participate in extended confession sessions that promise accelerated absolution. The litany of renewed oath extends by design, cadences stretched to expose tremor patterns and vocal stress indicators. Group penances offer community participation while enabling behavioral pattern recognition through crowd movement analysis. Devotional competitions measure endurance and knowledge while generating comprehensive physical capability databases. The surveillance apparatus activates systematically as morning prayers establish biometric baselines. Bio-Auspex sensors embedded in shrine walls measure galvanic skin response during extended litanies. Confession booths process elevated volumes, while algorithms correlate physiological responses with declared transgressions. Dockworker Theron kneels before Voldris, admitting petty theft with baseline stability until a fractional delay before speaking. The Emperor's name triggers variance flags. His penance strip prints, while his file advances to secondary review, statistical correction disguised as spiritual guidance. Real-time analysis begins revealing patterns as preliminary data streams into temporary processing centers. Citizens whose biometric readings indicate dangerous variance from established norms receive invitations for enhanced spiritual counseling. Initial removals target statistical outliers, individuals flagged by algorithmic correlation between confession data and behavioral analysis, sister hospitallers murmur gentle guidance while escorting selected citizens through vestry doors, newly connected to service corridors. Some return hours later with reddened eyes. Others route directly to redemption manufactories under sealed transport. The festival's celebratory facade erodes as enforcement escalates. Entire hab blocks receive collective blessing that masks systematic interrogation of residents whose social networks correlate with identified dissidents. The sororitas maintain ceremonial postures while conducting tactical sweeps through sectors flagged by algorithmic analysis. Category Omega files unlock under inquisitorial cipher, resolving names into vectors and vectors into processing schedules. Midnight brings the operation's climax as final data synthesis reveals the audit's true scope. The optimal suffering engine processes live inputs, recalculating deterrence yield against labor displacement risk while assigning graduated interventions. 3. Hab stacks receive mass absolution schedules. 2 require targeted removals. 1 exemplar penitent engine conversion will parade at tomorrow's closing ceremony. Theron's file appears in amber classification, low-risk cluster requiring workplace audit and enhanced prayer requirements rather than terminal processing. Cardinal Vex announces the festival's success through miraculous revelations of hidden heretical cells discovered through divine inspiration, actually algorithmic correlations that identified hundreds of citizens whose only transgression was statistical deviation from devotional norms. The celebration transforms into systematic purge as enforcement teams process the condemned while hymns continue echoing through emptied plazas. Dawn brings data transmission as compliance ratings pulse along trunk lines toward Malthius's Office of Ecclesiarchal Audit. Updated quotas establish elevated devotional requirements based on festival performance metrics. Ration allocations adjust downward for sectors showing compliance decline. Transport orders for redemption manufactories spool automatically. The sororitas fold their banners and depart, leaving behind a population unaware that their faith has been measured, catalogued, and found either sufficient or wanting. The audit data will reveal how devotional metrics integrate with other imperial surveillance systems, while the fate of citizens identified for enhanced spiritual counseling exposes the systematic transformation of celebration into enforcement mechanism. The audit data streams from Hive Tertius before the final hymns fade, flowing through adamantine trunk lines into the Office of Ecclesiarchal Audit, where Malthius initiates the synthesis rite. Raw devotional metrics undergo systematic refinement, cleaned for ambient variables like humidity variance, crowd density fluctuations, and hymn cadence drift, then normalized against the city's 10-year baseline to extract pure statistical faith from ceremonial theater. The processing reveals the audit's true scope: 847,000 individual biometric profiles, 1.2 million confession transcripts, and 340,000 behavioral correlations matrices transformed into actionable intelligence through algorithmic analysis. Cogitator arrays categorize citizens using standardized risk classifications that determine their fate with mathematical precision. Green designations indicate statistical compliance within acceptable variance thresholds. Amber classifications flag potential instability, requiring enhanced monitoring through targeted confession schedules and workplace surveillance. Red designations mandate immediate processing through the redemption pipeline. Theron's file appears in the Amber cohort, his confession-triggered variants earning corrective measures, increased prayer durations, confession frequency targets, and workplace audits designed to uncover secular infractions, justifying further intervention. His ration supplements taper over 6 weeks to encourage piety through manufactured need, hunger driving devotion in calculated cycles. The data integration extends far beyond Ministorum databases. Administratum cogitators ingest compliance maps and automatically adjust resource allocation based on devotional performance metrics. Sectors showing elevated compliance receive improved infrastructure maintenance and reduced taxation. Areas with declining metrics face systematic degradation, transport delays, power shortages, and sanitation failures, creating environmental pressure that encourages either emigration or enhanced religious participation. The system weaponizes scarcity itself, transforming material necessity into spiritual coercion through feedback loops that tighten with each iteration. Citizens flagged during the festival populate specialized databases, coordinating with other Imperial enforcement agencies. Productive dissidents route to servitorization contracts, their technical skills preserved, while independent thought undergoes surgical elimination. Charismatic individuals become penitent engines, their leadership potential weaponized against the populations they might have organized. The irredeemable vanish into redemption manufactories, generating revenue streams that fund surveillance expansion while removing statistical anomalies from population databases. The optimal suffering engine recalibrates using the city's new profile, adjusting deterrence coefficients and spectacle yields based on demographic density and transportation networks. Arbite's patrol rosters shift to randomize through flagged hab stacks. Sororitas Command receives devotional heat maps disguised as pilgrimage itineraries, positioning enforcement assets where compliance requires reinforcement. By dawn, the synthesis transforms abstract faith into predictive governance model. The audit wasn't designed to find overt heresy, but to forecast systemic instability before manifestation, enabling preemptive correction through targeted intervention. Every prayer becomes a data point in algorithms that determine resource allocation, enforcement priorities, and survival probabilities across the sector. The processed intelligence will reveal how faith metrics influence broader imperial policy decisions, while the connection between devotional compliance and planetary resource allocation exposes the economic incentives driving the Ministorum's transformation into a surveillance apparatus that consumes the very faith it claims to protect. The intelligence synthesis from Hive Tertius triggers deployment protocols that reveal the Ministorum's most sophisticated enforcement mechanism. The Adepta Sororitas, operating as military assets, while maintaining the legal fiction of independence required by the decree passive. Their coordination with audit data demonstrates how Sebastian Thor's reforms created not limitation, but opportunity. The prohibition against men, under arms circumvented through an all-female military force whose actions remain legally unassailable precisely because they appear religious rather than political. Sister Superior Cassia receives deployment orders through encrypted hymnal modifications, devotional verses containing tactical coordinates, and target classifications embedded within liturgical meter. Official mission documents describe ceremonial protection duties for shrine dedications, but embedded data specifies enforcement actions against citizens flagged by confession analysis. The sororitas maintain plausible deniability through theological language that transforms military operations into religious observance, making every bolter round a cleansing fire and every purge a spiritual intervention. The deployment follows devotional compliance patterns with algorithmic precision. Sectors showing statistical decline receive pilgrimage escorts whose routes coincide with flagged citizen locations. Areas requiring population reduction host shrine purification ceremonies that eliminate entire hab blocks through systematic cleansing, disguised as heresy suppression. Habstack 77 Gamma, identified through confession correlation analysis as harboring devotional variance clusters, receives a blessing of the faithful conducted by battle sisters, whose questions demonstrate surgical precision informed by Malthius's granular data. For amber classifications like Theron's sector, the approach emphasizes psychological pressure. Sisters conduct door-to-door spiritual censuses, their bolt guns holstered, but their presence generating internalized terror that forces compliance without overt violence. They know which neighbors showed suspicious confession patterns, which families exhibited biometric anomalies during prayers. The threat remains implicit but absolute, statistical deviance transformed into spiritual judgment requiring correction. Red classifications trigger direct action. The sisters advance with censer smoke and shot, their tactical movements synchronized to hymnal cadences that transform mass execution into sacramental act. Every operation receives theological justification through sophisticated legal frameworks that make their actions unassailable. Citizens aren't murdered but purified. Communities aren't destroyed but cleansed. Resistance isn't suppressed but corrected through divine intervention. The psychological conditioning enabling such absolute devotion operates through systematic indoctrination, equating enforcement with worship. Sororitas training emphasizes that mercy toward heretics constitutes betrayal of the emperor's will, while statistical variance represents spiritual corruption requiring surgical removal. They genuinely believe their actions serve divine purpose, making their effectiveness uncompromised by doubt or moral hesitation that might plague conventional enforcers. Coordination extends beyond the sororitas to encompass integrated imperial response. Arbites arrive for crowd safety, documenting incidental infractions, justifying later arrests. Administratum clerks adjust ration allocations for affected sectors. Mechanicus representatives collect suitable candidates for penitent engine conversion. The canoness delivers homilies framing deterrence as love, closing each operation with litanies thanking the faithful for assisting miracles. The system's effectiveness stems from citizens' inability to recognize enforcement patterns, while the psychological conditioning enabling such devotion reveals systematic transformation of faith into weaponized obedience. The sororitas' enforcement precision demands steady supplies of heretical threats, revealing the Ministorum's most insidious innovation: the systematic manufacture of the very dissent they claim to suppress. The confession analysis algorithms aren't calibrated merely to detect actual heresy, but to generate optimal quantities of suspected heretics, approximately 0.3% of any population under active investigation at any given time. This rate maintains institutional vigilance while avoiding numbers suggesting either administrative failure or systemic collapse requiring inquisitorial intervention. The calibration operates through theological precision disguised as doctrinal purity. Malthus adjusts variance thresholds quarterly based on enforcement quotas rather than spiritual necessity. When redemption manufactories require increased throughput for penitent engine production, confession parameters tighten, flagging previously acceptable devotional patterns as suspicious. The system cultivates heresy through gentle manipulation. A footnote changes in parish catechisms, shifting one preposition in the response of submission from "in his light" to "by his light." 3 weeks later, auditors test household recitation. Citizens who learned last quarter's wording register deviation, their adherence to older doctrine becoming evidence of dangerous traditionalism. Economic incentives drive expansion throughout the hierarchy. Confessors receive performance bonuses for identifying, processing candidates, creating pressure to interpret minor doctrinal variations as threatening deviations. Valdris earns advancement through his parish's exceptional heretic detection rates, achieved by cultivating theological uncertainty through deliberately contradictory guidance. Citizens seeking spiritual clarity receive conflicting interpretations, guaranteeing future infractions, generating statistical anomalies, justifying enhanced surveillance. Agents provocateurs manufacture heretical activity where natural dissent proves insufficient. Former priests deemed too empathetic for direct pastoral duties infiltrate worker guilds and neighborhood associations, encouraging minor doctrinal deviations discoverable later. They distribute texts containing subtle heresies, suggest unauthorized prayer variations, and organize discussion groups that inevitably develop into cells requiring elimination. The manufactured threats provide justification for surveillance expansion while creating enemies necessary for institutional consumption. This artificial heresy creation follows sophisticated patterns avoiding detection by higher authorities. Provocateurs target isolated communities with limited external communication, focusing on theological minutiae, prayer timing variations, ritual gesture modifications, scriptural interpretation debates that appear harmless until algorithmic analysis reveals patterns requiring intervention. Regional administrators balance manufactured threats against social stability. Too few heretics suggest enforcement inadequacy, risking resource reduction. Too many indicate systemic failure, potentially triggering sector-wide purges, eliminating the administrators themselves. Theron experiences this pressure through systematic arrangement rather than fabrication. A devotional mentor joins his work gang, gifting him a Saint Medallion, whose iconography differs by a single halo mark from standard issue. During the next census, Sister Cassia notes the deviation with polite gravity. His amber file brightens. The workplace audit discovers mislabeled solvent drums, common negligence elevated to moral risk through careful documentation, linking material fault to spiritual danger. The heresy industry creates self-perpetuating momentum, where manufactured dissent connects to broader imperial resource flows, while the systematic creation of enemies reveals how the heresy industry interfaces with other imperial institutions requiring steady supplies of dissidents to justify their expansion into the contemplation chambers. The manufactured heretics generated by algorithmic precision require systematic processing through facilities the Ministorum euphemistically terms contemplation chambers, installations where enhanced spiritual counseling transforms into bureaucratized torture operations designed to extract maximum information while maintaining theological justification. These represent the intersection of faith and systematic brutality, where pain becomes sacrament and confession transforms into intelligence, gathering through carefully calibrated suffering. Sister Dialogue's Celine supervises Chamber 14 with clinical detachment, her workspace designed for acoustic dampening and precise environmental control. The facility maintains shrine aesthetics, votive candles flickering around restraint apparatus, incense masking chemical sterilants, prayer wheels concealing monitoring equipment, transforming systematic brutality into religious observance. Behind ornate grills, cogitator arrays display real-time biometric data, psychological profiles, and compliance curves, tracking subjects' progress toward statistical normalization. The bureaucratic framework transforms torture into administrative procedure, governed by performance metrics and quality control audits. Interrogators receive advancement through confession extraction rates, subject survival statistics, and information quality assessments. Quarterly evaluations compare chamber efficiency across regional installations, creating competitive pressure that drives innovation in suffering techniques. The optimal pain engine calculates stimulus intensity against physiological tolerance, maximizing discomfort while preventing system shutdown that would terminate sessions prematurely. Theron's processing exemplifies the systematic methodology. His file indicates moderate pain tolerance and average psychological resilience, suggesting standard protocol duration calibrated through the 5-phase progression. Clarification establishes doctrinal vocabulary baselines while noting omissions in his religious knowledge. Dislocation introduces environmental manipulation, temperature fluctuations, sonic disruption, sensory deprivation, breaking psychological rhythm without visible agency. Intensification applies controlled pressure points and respiratory restriction, while compliance curves track his stress responses against algorithmic predictions. The revelation phase presents his preselected deviation, the altered medallion's iconography, allowing him to discover its manufactured significance through guided realization. Throughout, neural stimulators activate according to algorithmic progression, targeting specific nerve clusters, while psychological pressure mounts through subtle threats regarding family members' safety. The final consolidation phase offers absolution contingent on names, habits, and operational details that expand investigation parameters beyond his individual case. Quality control operates through omnipresent oversight. Catechism compliance officers observe behind smoked glass, authorized to pause sessions if script cadence drifts from approved protocols. Excessive brutality risks nullifying testimony and penalizes staff evaluations, while insufficient pressure fails to meet extraction quotas. The system calibrates mercy itself, auditing leniency as rigorously as cruelty to maintain optimal suffering ratios that maximize information yield without compromising subject viability. Most subjects processing through these chambers aren't actual heretics, but citizens whose devotional metrics triggered algorithmic flags. Their primary transgression involves statistical variance from behavioral norms, prayer timing, irregularities, confession frequency deviations, or biometric anomalies during mandatory observances. The chambers transform ordinary citizens into useful intelligence sources through pain calibrated to overcome resistance while extracting confessions to heresies they never committed. After 72 hours of systematic intervention, Theron's compliance curve stabilizes as he confesses to harboring ungrateful thoughts regarding the Emperor's divine plan, and admits to passive subversion through neglected prayer duties. His extracted testimony feeds back into surveillance databases, validating the initial algorithmic predictions while implicating neighbors and associates in fabricated conspiracies that expand investigation parameters. The system consumes its own output, transforming forced confessions into evidence justifying additional arrests through self-perpetuating cycles of manufactured guilt. The extracted confessions merge with the city's surveillance lattice by nightfall, seeding new flags and redefining baseline parameters that will determine tomorrow's targets. Each purification widens the net that justified it, while subjects surviving the contemplation process return to general population as living testimonies to the Ministorum's reach, their modified behavior patterns serving as warnings that feed the spiral of sanctification, consuming the Imperium from within. Theron's extracted confessions demonstrate the Ministorum's ultimate achievement, a self-perpetuating surveillance apparatus that grows stronger through its own operations. Each forced admission creates expanding investigation networks, transforming individual suffering into collective vulnerability through algorithmic precision that converts acquaintances into vectors and habits into risk categories. His testimony automatically generates surveillance flags for 7 associates, creating artificial conspiracy clusters that justify systematic investigation of previously compliant citizens. The system operates through sophisticated feedback mechanisms designed to prevent detection by higher authorities. Regional compliance rates maintain statistical stability, while investigation parameters broaden systematically, consuming increasing percentages of the population through gradual expansion of suspicious categories. Citizens previously classified as green designation shift to amber through association with processed subjects, their devotional metrics reinterpreted through updated algorithmic baselines that transform yesterday's normalcy into today's variance. This expansion triggers profound psychological transformation within the populace. Citizens internalize the surveillance apparatus, becoming their own monitors through manufactured paranoia that reduces institutional resource requirements while expanding coverage. Theron's return to general population creates visible deterrent effects. His modified behavior patterns serve as warnings, encouraging preemptive compliance from associates who witnessed his processing. Work crews develop internal surveillance networks reporting minor deviations before they trigger official investigation, while families monitor each other's devotional performance to avoid collective punishment. The psychological landscape reshapes to match the surveillance machinery. Citizens stop asking whether something is true and ask instead whether it is safe to be heard saying it. Purity codes metastasize into micro-rituals, extra breath before the Emperor's name, prescribed pauses between litanies, identical grip pressure on prayer wheels. Deviance shrinks until only fatigue remains. Then fatigue itself becomes evidence of hidden sin requiring correction. Each iteration tightens the spiral through systematic parameter adjustment. Confession analysis algorithms incorporate new data from processed subjects, refining variance detection to identify increasingly subtle deviations from behavioral norms. The system maintains an optimal heresy rate, high enough to justify its immense infrastructure, while low enough to avoid suggesting systemic failure that might attract unwanted inquisitorial attention. This creates insatiable demand for enemies, ensuring perpetual motion through manufactured necessity. The Ministorum's institutional momentum becomes unstoppable through economic dependency on manufactured crises. Redemption manufactories require steady throughput to justify operational costs. Contemplation chambers need processing quotas to validate staffing levels. Sororitas deployment schedules depend on heretical activity rates maintaining threat assessments. The institution consumes the problems it creates while generating new categories of transgression to fuel continued expansion. The ultimate paradox emerges. The Ministorum's success in maintaining order requires continuous creation of disorder to justify its existence. The institution has become a parasite on the very faith it claims to protect, transforming genuine devotion into surveillance data while weaponizing spiritual seeking into statistical performance. Every act of piety feeds the machine that generates the fear necessary for its continued expansion. The long-term sustainability of this system, dependent on manufactured crises, will determine the final meaning of imperial faith. The manufactured crises complete their cycle as dawn breaks across Hive Tertius, 10 million voices rising in the litany of dawn, while servo-skulls measure their devotion with mechanical precision. The opening image returns transformed, each prayer now revealed as surveillance data. Every confession a potential investigation trigger, all faith reduced to statistical performance, subject to algorithmic optimization through the Ministorum's vast apparatus of measurement and control. Maltius processes the morning's harvest with practiced efficiency, his cogitator terminal displaying overnight enforcement statistics. 47 citizens received enhanced spiritual counseling. 112 face elevated devotional requirements based on biometric variance during mandatory observances. The numbers satisfy quarterly quotas while maintaining sector stability, demonstrating mathematical precision in transforming human suffering into administrative success through systematic bureaucratization of the human soul. Theron joins the morning litany with modified behavior patterns that serve as living testimony to the system's effectiveness. His voice blends perfectly with measured cadences, heart rate remaining within acceptable parameters tracked by hidden bio-auspex arrays. He performs micro-rituals of compliance with mechanical precision. Grip pressure calibrated to parish means, breathing regulated to approved intervals, confession timing synchronized to recommended frequencies. His associates observe and imitate, the contagion spreading through caution that validates algorithmic predictions. The surveillance apparatus continues its relentless operations. New metrics cascade from prayer wheels and confessional booths into analytical engines that generate tomorrow's investigation targets. Redemption manufactories report meeting salvific yield quotas. Sororitas deployment schedules align with updated devotional heat maps. Arbeits patrols pivot towards sectors where compliance curves flatten. The economy of fear turns another crank, each department recording devotion in its own administrative script while converging on identical arithmetic. The Ministorum's true function stands revealed. Not spiritual salvation, but social control through weaponized faith that creates populations policing themselves through internalized surveillance and manufactured guilt. Citizens develop survival strategies that demonstrate the system's ultimate victory over human autonomy through statistical normalization. The procedural creed emerges from this revelation. Maintain statistical normalcy through measured piety. Neither excessive nor insufficient devotion triggers investigation. Avoid emotional extremes during prayers. Biometric sensors detect passion as potential instability. Confess regularly, but not excessively. Algorithms flag both patterns as suspicious. Report neighbors whose faith appears inadequate, while avoiding accusations suggesting personal knowledge of heretical activity. Memorize current catechisms and forget yesterday's interpretations. Hold prayer wheels steady. Let breath fall evenly at the Emperor's name. Offer minor faults before discovery. The servo skulls ascend from morning prayers, their memory banks heavy with 10 million souls reduced to probability calculations. They are selecting tomorrow's targets from today's devotional data, transforming holy hymns into the quiet bureaucratic hum of torture screams. The Emperor remains silent on the golden throne. The numbers answer for him.